Hey everyone, what's up? What's going on? I'm Joe, and this is the pre-roll before the show, and what's up, what's going on? It's just something I say now, acceptance. It's the first step. Or maybe it's the last step, I don't know, but let me tell you about what's going on this week so we can get right into the review. Thank you, everybody who came out to Tattooed Mom this past Saturday to watch my guest spot on the KidFlix podcast live episode. It was a ton of fun. Thank you, Ross Wiseman, for having me on the show, and I'll keep you guys updated when our live episode and when this past week's KidFlix live episode goes online. Also, speaking of, after the recording this past Saturday, I stuck around to watch a friend of the podcast, Film Loop's live episode, and it was really great. Go ahead and check out their new episode that came out this past Tuesday. I actually have a small cameo where I recommend that they review Duncan Jones' Moon. And you can find links to that and everything else I just mentioned via our various social media, which you can find on our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com, and I think that's it. So let's just get into it. We're going to be reviewing Incredibles 2 this week. Enjoy. Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast. And this week we'll be reviewing Incredibles 2.
You know, Joe, you've always been Incredibles to me.
Oh, thank you, Mike. I think you're Incredibles too. Hey everyone, and welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, featuring two guys getting hot and bothered and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And thank you to Christine Morosky. Christine.
It's Christine!
It's Christine! We covered this!
That's her government name!
Of Lady Bird that she was on with her boyfriend, Daniel Pietchakolan. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah.
I feel like I nailed that.
Yeah, you did nail
I
that.
feel really good about that.
I'm like super impressed right now.
Thank you. But she sent that to us on Facebook, and you can also send us synonyms on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, email, Gmail, wherever you want to get in contact with us. We would love to hear your synonyms for drunk.
All the above.
Hit us up. But yeah, we're doing Incredibles 2 this week, and we're drinking beer. And
What kind of beer did you get, Mike?
I got a beer from your hometown, Joe. R5 Lager, 18901. Is that the actual
That's the zip code, baby.
for your Doylestown? It's from Doylestown Brewing Company.
Beer went all over my laptop.
Oh, they got a thing to learn about canning their beers.
Honestly, though, I was telling Mike this. I was like, every time I go to this brewery, which is like 2 blocks that way.
Oh, you go to the actual brewery?
Yeah. This is like my favorite beer. Trying to taste it.
It is kind of like overwhelmed by like the aluminum of the can.
Yeah. It's honestly not as great in a can. Sponsor us, Doylestown Brewery. Honestly, I'm not feeling it right now. Hey, Doylestown Brewery.
Doylestown is better in a draft. Yeah, it's all right.
It's kind of like a skunky can.
I don't really get the skunky part. It tastes
Something
light and pilsnery.
You know what? Honestly,
it doesn't taste too different from this Bud Light.
No, I think that's what it is. I don't know. When I get this on draft, I really enjoy it, and it's not because it's the cheapest beer they have. Guys, stop accusing me of that.
What? Me saving money?
What? I don't have a lot of money to begin with, but why would you think that of me?
I like nice things.
Hey, Doylestown Brewery, I've sent you an email before. Why don't you get back?
To read your fucking emails.
Hey, Joe, we've done the research. Podcast, it's not that popular.
Not a lot of money there.
The numbers just don't make sense.
Also, you said some mean things about our beer on your Incredibles 2 episode.
You know what? Hey, listen, I'll buy a growler and you'll pour some of this R5 into that growler, and Mike and I will do another review, and I'll show Mike.
It's okay in a draft.
Yes. And why people shouldn't buy it in cans.
Available now at the Doylestown Acme.
There's actually, like, I think I've seen this slightly. Like, I was kind of surprised when you brought it to me. I was like, whoa, are they canning this now? But
It was on like they had like a whole display set up with like a whole tower of these cans.
think
They
they're
bought a
making
ton.
push, I think. Locally. Like,
I think you got to. I mean, that's the whole reason I bought it. I wouldn't have picked this can out if it was just on the shelf, but it was like on display and it was like Doylestown Brewing Company. And I was like, oh, cool. That's right here where I am right now.
honestly, I got another bone to pick with this brewery.
Oh, okay.
They used to have like really great food, and now they have like mediocre like appetizers.
Did they change the menu or the quality of the food that was on the menu changed?
They both. Yeah. They used to have like great burgers, and now it's like, you want a cheesesteak egg roll that's kind of warm? And I'm like, no, not really. I want like that really great like burger that you gave me the last time I was here. But I think like that shit was like their grill or whatever was getting in the way of like what they were using to brew like other stuff. So they started. They have limited realty, I think, in this area.
Some of like the best food I've ever had sometimes has been
at
at breweries, and I don't know if that has to do with like just being in a better mindset because you're drinking good beer.
No, I
also just feel like
yeah.
creative people who can do creative things in the kitchen are a lot of times drawn to breweries. Mm-hmm. You know, they get their friends together to, you know.
Exactly.
Anyway.
No, yeah. I've been to Tired Hands Brewery, which I need to bring a beer for you from that brewery. But they have
I feel like I've had beer from there.
Oh, really?
From Dan, maybe?
Okay. Yeah.
Where is Tired Hands?
Like Ardmore, PA. I think it's like right outside of Philadelphia. But they have like a buttered toast that's incredible. Ooh. Like they have like a toast that's like out of this world. Also their beer is like incredibly expensive, but I'm like, oh, this is fucking worth it. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting breweries around here. But that's for our beer fans. Let's satisfy our movie fans. That satisfied our local beer fans.
Finally.
Finally, somebody's talking about Doylestown Brewery and how bad their appetizers are. Let's get into Incredibles 2, though.
Let me read this IMDb description, and then Joe can give you some background and context for The Incredibles 2.
I don't mind this. I would drink a 6-pack.
Incredibles 2. No the.
That's, is there no to the?
On Incredibles.
Okay.
Right? Incredibles 2?
Yeah. R5. There's 5 Incredibles. Let's get into it.
Bob Parr, parentheses, Mr. Incredible, is left to care for Jack Jack while Helen, Elastigirl, also in parentheses, is out saving the world. Something's missing there. There's 2 other kids.
Is that it? Is that where it ends? All right.
2 other kids going on there. Maybe a villain. I don't know.
Yeah, really. Okay. Well, Incredibles 2 without the excuse me, Lord. Forgive me, God.
Forgive me, Father. For I have burped.
So our director, Brad Bird, has directed 2 episodes of The Simpsons, The Iron Giant, which we reviewed with
Ross Wiseman on Kidsflix.
Kidsflix. Yeah, you can see our review of that movie right there and then.
And you can see Ross on our live episode that Joe's going to plug the details for in the intro of this episode.
Thanks, Joe.
Moving on.
But he did. I mean, listen to this fucking list: The Iron Giant, The Incredibles. I mean, he did a short film called Jack Attack. That doesn't matter. Okay, The Iron Giant, The Incredibles, Ratatouille, Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, which is actually a good film. Tomorrowland, which is not. And Incredibles 2, and he has an upcoming film, 1906, which I don't know what that's about. But yeah, what an incredible fucking
Incredible.
yes.
Go on.
Yeah, I agree.
Attention had to be paid to that.
No, I agree. It's also written by Brad Bird.
Does he usually write his movies?
Yeah. It's starring Craig T. Nelson, Holly Hunter, Sarah Vowell, Huck Milner, and Samuel L. Jackson. The score was by Michael Giacchino.
My boy.
Did I pronounce that right?
No, you're right. Yeah, he did the Lost score,
Oh, okay.
which is really good.
I didn't realize that.
Bunch of other stuff.
Which I love this score. It's got the fucking trumpets. It's got the fucking like this. Okay, let's get like right into this. Have you seen the first Incredibles?
No. Well,
That's fine, and that's fine. I think
I saw part of it when
Okay.
I was younger.
right.
Not like I was not the target audience at the time. But I watched part of it because people had told me how good The Incredibles was,
Right.
and I got bored and I turned it off.
Yeah.
I don't know in what context I was watching it, but I was just kind of like, all right, I don't need to finish this. I remember being a little underwhelmed by it.
Right.
So no. I saw one half of The Incredibles.
And that's fine. I honestly don't remember the context of what I saw the original Incredibles.
When did it come out? They say it's been 14 years, right? So
Yeah, when did that come out?
2004. I guess we could have done that math ourselves.
I don't know what I was doing in 2004 that like
I mean,
would have
I was
seen it.
14 in 2004, so you were 15 probably. So
Yeah, so I was essentially in my first year of high school.
yeah, if not
Jeez.
maybe
I don't-
sophomore year.
I don't know. I don't know what I was doing, but it really had an impression on me. And until this point, I would refer to The Incredibles hesitantly as my favorite Pixar movie. I love WALL-E. I love Ratatouille. These are both
Toy
films-
Story,
These are yes.
the original Toy Story.
That's true. I often forget Toy Story.
I think a lot of people do.
These are all films that end with E, but but
And that's what you come to this
Yes,
podcast for, that in-depth analysis. A lot of Pixar movies end with E.
But Incredibles, it didn't end with E. It ended with and I think like that's what really started
It was different.
yeah. I think Toy Story 2 is an incredible movie, by the way. But yeah, no, I would go on to say that Incredibles was my favorite movie.
Pixar movie.
Pixar
or
movie.
favorite movie.
Of all time. Pixar movie.
The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, The Incredibles,
The Incredibles is a good movie, though.
Scorsese, Coppola, Bird.
I mean, but honestly, also, I mean, look at his resume. I mean, he's doing. I mean, you like the Iron Giant, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it's an incredible feat for an animated film or whatever. And have you ever seen Ratatouille?
It's one of the few Pixar
Okay,
ones
it's-
besides the Cars movies that I have yet to
It's
see.
truly incredible. I think it's on
Moana.
the same level.
Or no, Moana's Disney.
Yeah, fuck Moana. That's just fucking terrible. Honestly, I don't.
Sorry, Joe Mano.
I know. I talked about this somewhere. I think maybe I talked about this on
On
our.
the live episode with Joe.
Maybe, but I think I recently talked about this on How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the group or whatever, Facebook group. I said, I don't like Frozen and I don't like Moana. I don't like... Okay, no, maybe this isn't a private conversation. I said, I don't like Frozen, I don't like Moana. I don't like kind of like that singing kind of...
Yeah, you did say recently
animated.
you don't like 3D musicals.
Yes,
3D,
3D
Disney
musicals.
haven't been good for you.
Yeah. So I do like WALL-E and I do like Ratatouille and everything. And I think Incredibles kind of stood up to that. And I think this new movie kind of sticks up to that. But
That's what you think the competitors are for best Pixar movie, though, are WALL-E and Ratatouille?
Yes.
Because I feel like a lot of people would say Up. I wouldn't, but I think a lot of people would.
No, I if anything, you reminded me that like something like Toy Story and Toy Story 2 exist. I think Up is an incredible Pixar like short film that they show before the movie, and then it's actually part of the movie, and the movie continues to go on.
What did you think of this short film before this one?
Oh, I fucking loved it. Oh,
It got a reaction out of
Bow
that
or
theater.
whatever. Yeah. Ooh.
It's
What? Yeah. Tell me what the reaction was.
there was I had
'Cause,
I had,
no,
very,
I
I had
was-
very vocal people in my theater.
Whoa. Okay. First of all, what was your theater like?
I went to see it like 5:30 on Friday, so it was like opening night, but it had obviously been playing Thursday. It was
Right.
pretty packed, but I also had an easy time finding a seat for one person. So like I got there at 5:30, and as the trailers played, the theater like really filled up.
Right.
But pretty packed for just in terms of movies I've seen this year. Like, and they're not as many kids as I was expecting for 5:30. There was definitely a decent amount, but there was also just a lot of like people who were there as adults. I think there was a few people who were just like high adults
Good.
in my theater. I think
Yeah.
they were like the vocal people in there. I didn't see them, so I don't know if they were actually high or anything. They were acting like
Couldn't smell it. Right. Yeah.
yeah, they were just very much like responding to everything like whoa.
I've smelled that in movies where I'm like, oh man, these people are all fucking high.
I didn't smell it at all.
Right.
I just there was something about the way that they were acting that was
Right.
like
Yeah.
these seemed like people who were under the influence of something, having a really good time watching a movie, just fully invested in like every twist and turn of the short film and the movie going on. But they were reacting a lot to like when I don't know if there's spoilers for a short film before
No.
Incredibles.
Fuck you guys.
The experience is watching the short film.
Oh,
but like
most definitely,
when
yeah.
she eats the little dumpling thing.
She's about to eat the
She does eat it.
the bow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like they all like freaked out and they're like, what the fuck?
No, I had similar experiences. There was a vocal reaction to that when she's eating the bow, and then it starts to cry and scream like a baby.
Is that what that dumpling is called? As a bow or?
Yeah, I think a bao is it's a dumpling.
Okay.
It's a type of dumpling that has a stuffing, like some sort of traditional, I don't know, Chinese,
Look
Japanese.
delicious. Made me hungry.
Oh, no, yeah, it definitely looks, delicious. When I was in Philadelphia or whatever, I was at some, like, Chinese or Japanese restaurant, and I didn't know what to order, and they were like, bao. And I was like, okay. And they're like, you're gonna like it. And I was like, okay. And they brought it out to me, and it was
Delicious.
very great. Yeah.
Nice.
Which is fantastic. I wish that happened in more restaurants where I was like, I honestly
I don't know. Order for me.
I'm honestly not too familiar with this specific culture. I would love for you to, suggest something. And it's like they were right on top of it, and they suggested it immediately. But yeah, it was like really great because it was something that didn't represent like my nationality nor my gender nor because it's this film kind of about like empty nest, and it's this film kind of about like I'm like I teared up during this movie multiple times. Like this short film, it's weird.
No,
Like
they're very effective with like these moving films where
I kind of cried during the one during Finding Dory too.
Was that the little seabird one? Yeah.
Yeah, that because that was like
this was even more sad. I feel like 'cause it had like an up kind of like
that was hyper realistic,
Yeah.
and I think maybe that was why. But this one was especially so. I think just because, I mean, we have like friends who are like the product, like or the child of like immigrants, kind of, and this is like very much empty nest syndrome, and this is very much child of immigrants. And it's especially sad when like again she kind of tries to bite into this dumpling, and then she she raises this dumpling as her child, and then this dumpling wants to kind of identify as its own kind of being away from her, and then it gets to the point where like the dumpling brings home like a girlfriend,
and then we find out that she's
her.
projecting, and it's
Right, yes.
she has a son that looks like how we ended up seeing the dumpling looking, and that was really because it is this weird jarring thing where like she eats the dumpling at first, and everyone's like, "What the fuck?" in the theater, and then the kid walks into the door and looks exactly like the dumpling, and you're like, "Oh." That's what the movie was about. It was about this projection of emptiness and loss, and it was about like this connection that this family had through food, and like that was something that I really connected to. Just like the scene where he like sits down on the bed and they just eat the one dessert together. Like that's like really touching, and it reminded me a lot in a weird way, just sort of a like ambient way of like Spirited Away, which is like one of the few I keep meaning to watch the rest of like the Studio Ghibli movies, but the one thing that I always took away from that movie is just that weird like
relationship with food.
That, and it wasn't in Studio or in the Spirited Away, it wasn't really about what you were seeing. It was about like the feeling that it was getting across, and it was that kind of like unsettling feeling in an almost like comfortable way. Like it's a kid's movie, but it makes you feel very unsettled in that movie. There's a lot of weird stuff going on, and it's not scary. It's just, this is weird. And it's not exactly, as straightforward as like Disney movies are, where it's like, this is the emotion, this is whatever. It's just kind of like, kind of join us on this ride. And that's kind of what I got from this in terms of like, her projecting her feelings onto like this like dumpling, and then like eating the dumpling, and like that's weird and like jarring at first, but you're just meant to follow that like emotional journey of like that's what she's going through. It wasn't about the actual dumpling, and
because it's a weird metaphor, and I didn't need like Amy Poehler to play like I'm an emotion in like a little kid's mind, kind of like I didn't need that fucking shit. I needed something like this where like I saw that and I fucking like really started to cry on like some.
It's what I love about
some fucking like 5-year-old kid next to me. Like I need that kind of shit in a movie.
It's what's great about the Pixar short films is like, hey, like I feel like not a lot of people
They get to experiment and shit.
Well, because they put like these constrictions on themselves, but they don't end up being actually confined by them. Like they work within them, and it's kind of like, what do we actually need? They strip away all the bullshit of all the other like Pixar movies. Like I do love Pixar. I think they do the best of animation by far.
Most definitely.
Nobody does these kind of like important kids movies better than Pixar
Disney
does.
Kind of stunted them? I think kind of so.
Oh, in terms of like, have they held them back since they acquired Pixar again? Yeah, I would agree for sure. But I feel like when they operate under these short film premises of like, how do we get characters defined and then relatable, and then also like endearing in like 5 minutes, and then how do we get across stuff like in a movie, like in a short film like this, like without words. Like again, I don't want to make this whole review about the short film
definitely.
But it's very effective, and it was cool. I just want to talk about it for a little bit.
No, it was fantastic, and I think even I had a packed theater. I saw it on opening night. I told Mike, and Mike's like, I don't want to go into a fucking packed theater where there's fucking crying kids and yada yada yada. I said, there's something about Pixar that knows how to control the crowd, kind of, and that's what a fucking wonderful talent. Because nobody ruined this movie for me. I can tell you like 100 different titles that were ruined by audiences for me. But
there was no.
both
There were a
Bao
bunch of
and
kids
The
in mine.
Incredibles 2, not ruined for me.
There was no kids that were like crying during it. There was no kids that were like, like just jumping around and being antsy, and like their dad having to be like, just sit the fuck down. Like
I can tell you like 4 different Minion movies that has happened.
Yeah.
But not during this.
But yeah, let's jump into actual Incredibles 2.
Let's do it. So, I mean, something that I think if you watched the original Incredibles, but you've probably totally grasped onto in this film, is that they are set in this kind of like retro future, like Tomorrowland kind of. No,
I feel like it's like an alternate.
it's like
like it is still in that time period, but it's that time period where they advanced faster than they actually did.
right, yeah, and I really love that.
Which Brad Bird must just love because it's the same time period as Iron Giant.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Ratatouille, but
Oh no, it very much is. It's
Ratatouille is in that time period, or
no, but when American directors go abroad, I think they can kind of just set it in whatever time period they want, even though it's modern. It's kind of like nobody in Ratatouille has smartphones or anything. Like
yeah.
you know, like it's kind of
just
like
foreign to them,
oh,
so.
it's abroad. You know, like no, yeah, it definitely it's kind of this weird kind of BioShock. I don't know. It's just weird. It's like this, it's this retro future where it's kind of like, oh, it's like Mad Men, except it's now, and you know, there's all these different interpretations.
which is weird with like the theme that they start getting across in this, like the
Most
whole
definitely.
like screen slaver, like
Yep.
addiction to screens thing. I mean, they handle it all right because they just do it through the addiction to like TV, and it's just kind of like this sort of visual thing of like Jack keeps waking up to go like watch the TV and, you know, sit in front of the TV, and like there's the one scene where they're like eating dinner and Dash is like, can I be excused, and then blah, blah, jumps all the way over and just turns the TV on like immediately. But it is kind of just this like small subtle thing that's not really like totally expressed in the film.
If I can be completely honest, I haven't rewatched The Incredibles. And
You only saw it once?
no, I watched it 2 or 3 times.
Oh, but since it came out.
But it's been a really long time since I've seen The Incredibles, the first film. And
Yeah, I think when I watched it, it was probably like 2008 or 2009.
right,
Like I was probably a legal adult
and
by the
also,
time I watched it, and I'd already heard many people be like, "It's the most underrated Pixar movie ever, and it's the best movie of all time." And
also you get this. I don't know if this was before Bao or after Bao. Did you get that whole thing where it was like Samuel Jackson? I didn't like that. I did not like that.
it was
at all.
before Bao, because I remember watching
Yeah.
that and being like, "Are they not going to do the fucking short
Yes,
film? That's what I
thought-
come to
yes,
Pixar movies
no,
for."
exactly. I thought that was taking the place of the Pixar.
I was
film.
mad, and then Bao came on, and I was like, "Okay."
Yeah, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" I didn't need to see that. Like, I understand that it's been 14 years, but I needed to see something like that.
I don't need to see what Craig T. Nelson looks like.
Oh my god, he looks so fucking old. Yeah, I wish they almost didn't do that, because like eventually halfway through the movie I had to stop picturing what he looked like.
They
and
do that for
start
a lot of kids
projecting
movies
on that.
now. They did it before, like A Wrinkle in Time
Really?
in my theater. Yeah.
I don't think I got that.
Some of the theater chains also, like, I was expecting it to be one of those, like, don't turn your cell phone on during the movie, because a lot of the theater chains that I go to have, like, pre-filmed stuff from people in the movie being like, blah, 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 blah. I made the movie this way. I did it for this reasons. Also, don't turn your phone on like during the movie. Like,
Right.
it's like it's presented like it's like a TV spot, and then it turns into, and here's why you don't have your phone on during the movie.
Yeah.
Like at AMC does that, and I've seen it at Cinemark a few times too. Mm-hmm. So I thought it was going to be that, and then I was like, oh, this is actually probably just being shown at all theaters before the movie.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay. So let's start with, hey Joe, why do you like The Incredibles so much, and why do you propose that this is one of the best Pixar films that you've ever seen? Okay. I'm glad you asked. Because I think it's this family dynamic, and I don't think we see this in a lot of other Pixar films. I think it's this. I don't know. We literally don't see a traditional family dynamic or family
Most
unit
kids' movies have one of the parents dead.
in Pixar films. It's not only that, but it's also this kind of X-Men kind of appeal, where it's kind of like, oh, well, like X-Men is really just this kind of like, metaphor for racism or so on and so forth, where it's kind of like The Incredibles is able to use kind of the two children coming of age and having superpowers kind of as this metaphor for puberty or kind of just not being able to get along with your parents. And I think that's really what shines in the first movie, and I think that really comes through in this movie too, especially with the female character who I'm embarrassed I can't remember what her
Violet?
name is. What is her name?
The daughter,
Yes,
Violet,
Yes, Violet. And
I think.
I really kind of started to get teary-eyed like around a lot of her parts, because it is this like gigantic metaphor of like she's embarrassed of her family, but obviously it's not for the real reasons. It's just because they have to have this identity kind of they have to hide their identity or whatever. Anyway, we kind of pick up into this in this new film. There's this.
Is there a cliffhanger at the end of Incredibles?
No, not really.
I feel like I saw so many memes that were like, I waited 14 years to see what happens like at the end of, and they would like show like a screen cap from like the first Incredibles. It was another thing kind of tainting my experience going into this movie is like all the memes and like talk about, like I feel like it was really just like one meme kind of being shared in different like light in terms of that, just that idea of like if a fucking like 5-year-old like doesn't like appreciate Incredibles, I'm gonna like freak out because like I've waited 14 years for this shit. Like this idea of like all these like grown like man children who like don't want like kids to enjoy the Incredibles as much as they do, and like I don't know, something about that is like very like grotesque to me. Like
Right.
that whole idea
No, I
of
totally
like, oh,
get
this
that.
is our movie and you guys don't appreciate it enough. Like, well, yeah, because they weren't fucking born in 2004. Like, or
Right.
don't you want them to enjoy it as well and like raise a whole new generation of kids
Yeah.
on Incredibles too?
Most
Like,
definitely. Yeah. I think there's some sort of cliffhanger with like whatever villain was happening. And I think it was supposed to kind of like, oh man, what is like the future of superheroes supposed to look like? And I think we were able to kind of gather that through
are they outlawed at the end of
no.
The Incredibles? Oh, so there's a bunch
That's
that
a
like
new
not having
development, yeah.
seen or not having finished the first Incredibles. There's a bunch of stuff at the beginning of this movie that I was like, oh, okay, that must have been the ending of The Incredibles, which is kind of weird.
No. That's kind of something that is hinted at. Kind of is like where the bad guys kind of look like good guys, yada, yada, yada. That's kind of the end of The Incredibles. Again, I don't remember it too well. I don't want to speak too securely or too confidently about that or whatever. But I think there's something with like supervillains wearing like superhero mask or something, and maybe there was some sort of government thing where it was kind of like, let's just get rid of all superheroes, kind of. Yeah, I mean, again, much like X-Men. But yeah, we really kind of jump into this film with kind of this. I don't even know what to describe him as, like the villain, like a kind
In
of
the beginning,
gopher or
the Underminer. I thought he was
the
great.
Underminer. Yeah, yes. Which is,
I don't know what the villains are like in the first Incredibles, but like it was like comedic.
No, they're all kind of.
He
like
was
that,
he was
yeah.
so goofy, and it was almost like it was like making fun of villains
Mm-hmm.
in actual comic books, where it's like, this is my thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Like everyone's got to have like a thing, and
Which is why the kind of.
he even says at one point like, "You've been undermined."
Which is kind of why the newer villain in this is kind of like a shock. Like he's a little darker or whatever.
But he had a theme.
He did.
I liked him at first.
I didn't. Yeah, no. Again, his monologue was kind of like you're watching all these people on screens, yada yada yada, and I was kind of like,
That's his voice.
oh, this is kind of new for The Incredibles. Like somebody who has like a very distinct kind of mission. And that was weird. But again, I also liked this whole kind of opening set piece. It showed the kind of Mr. Incredible as this kind of like this whatever patriarchal kind of figure, and Mrs. Incredible or Elastigirl was kind of taking this back seat or whatever, and the kids were even taking a further backseat and taking care of Jack or whatever. It really set up the movie. It was really great. And it made me appreciate, when I watched trailers for this film, I was kind of like, is that the premise? Like, Mrs. Incredible is just like the forefront. Mm-hmm. She's just kind of like stuck in this weird PR kind of.
I did like that plot point and that arc in this movie, but I have to admit that as much as I liked the first scene, it wasn't for reasons of setting that up. Like I thought it was a fun first scene to watch. I thought the Underminer was just kind of like a fun thing to think about, like someone who's just kind of like bought into this like name and this
Mr.
costume.
Incredible was definitely like, I'll take the lead on this.
Maybe it's just because I didn't see the first one, but it just kind of seemed like the family acting as normal, and I didn't really get the, like, I was kind of not confused, because I mean, it just could have took it at face value, but I was a little taken back when they were like, oh, like you really bungled that one, like Mr. Incredible, and like, you caused a lot of damage that didn't need to like happen. And I was kind of, I get maybe because I didn't finish the first one, I didn't realize that he not a bumbling person in the first one, or
no, I do think this is a new kind of development.
so he is like a heroic person in the first one, or
Yeah.
he's like the superhero archetype, or
But I think we get to look at it from a new angle in this movie. It's kind of like Man of Steel, where it's kind of like, fuck, man, you just destroyed this whole town. Like, like
that was another thing where I felt like that was territory that has been tread so many times.
It has
in all
been,
these other
yes.
superhero movies, and this wasn't really like. I was almost looking for them to like, if they're gonna go that way, like tread it in a way that's like satire of how much we're, like every superhero movie. I feel like that's like the turn where they're like, all right, what do we do in like the sequel or the third one? And it's like, all right, well, you caused too much damage in the first one, or there's implications to being the good guy or whatever.
This is very much a superhero movie that I think, back in.
And I mean, like kids haven't seen,
Yes.
a lot of these ones that we're talking about. But I guess then my other problem is that like I don't feel like this movie actually is targeting kids for the audience. It doesn't seem like a great kids movie.
Yeah, I guess so.
Like, I think kids were enthralled because Pixar animation is incredible, especially in this one.
Oh yeah.
There's times where I'm like, that looks like fucking like stop motion animation. It looks so real.
Yep.
Some of the 3D shit in here. But
but
I didn't hear a lot of kids laughing. I didn't hear a lot of kids like really being invested in this. Like, I mean, that's not to say that they didn't enjoy it. You know, it wasn't vocal, and you know, maybe kids were affected by this in a way that was more internal and that we won't know about. But it just doesn't seem like a great kids movie, even though I think it's an all right movie.
I also think this animation kind of looks terrible at points.
Really? Compared to the first Incredibles?
Oh, most definitely not. But I think
That was one of the things that did turn me off about the first Incredibles.
I think that
It's like Toy Story animation, but 2004.
I think this has a less graceful transition between the first and the second than Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. Yeah. It was just
It is
kind of
harder
like,
because it's actual people.
There's sometimes where they have like, especially when they have like kind of like the goggles on all three of the characters and they're just kind of like standing there, they kind of just all look like 3D models that are just kind of like, hey, what are you doing? Like kind of like, and they would just float away.
Yeah, I don't
Like,
know.
I
They
don't
look
know.
to me like I could see like Brad Bird's hand in it because it looks like the animation from Iron Giant.
You're right. But
So
also
it seems
looks
like it's brought to life in this 3D way. I think the lighting is what I really liked in the scenes that they put these
I
characters
love
in.
some of the-
There's a lot of
There's
things
some lighting that looks like comic book like
there's
lighting.
parts
and
that remind me of like playing Arkham Asylum on
yeah.
Xbox 360,
Yeah.
and I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
like makes me want to go back and play that game. Like it feels like Batman swooping down when she's like elastigirling like across like the city at parts. Or just like, I mean, they'll put the two of them like Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl like in front of the pool and like have them be kind of like front lit like that, and they're just like silhouettes. There's just a lot of like really nice like lighting choices in this that like seem a little more visionary than like your average Pixar movie in some ways. And like I feel like they're playing really well to the way that it's stylized. It's not like, you know, it's not like the animation in what's the movie? Like Monsters University. Like a movie like that where it's like incredible technical achievement in terms of like being able to animate all the different hairs on Sully, or even like Brave, that was like a big thing where they were like, how many fucking hairs are on this like redhead girl's head, like, and it looked incredible in that way. This, like, it's stylized, you know, like sometimes their hair just sticks on their head like a Lego character, but like they light them in like such beautiful scenes that like it doesn't matter that the people don't look real. You know, like they can be just these 3D brought to life versions of stylized 2D drawings that Brad Bird drew, you know.
Elastigirl's hair looks incredible sometimes. It looks like she's in a motorcycle and she's fucking flying down the highway, and her hair looks like a woman who's going down the highway, and her hair's kind of been jumbled a little bit, and it's a little staticky, and I'm just like, I don't know, like I don't know what I like more, like the kind of this like weird helmet hair or this kind of just like fucking free flowing staticky hair.
Yo, she thick though. She had no business being that thick in a kids movie.
She do though. There's some point where like Mr. Incredible is like, damn, who designed this outfit? Who designed this? There is something to be said about like this retro future kind of weird. Like he's got these incredibly broad, ginormous like shoulders and biceps and yada yada yada. He's incredibly strong and whatever, but she's got like the thickest waist and the most like childbearing hips you could imagine, kind of. And in that way, it's kind of like in this retro future like aesthetic where it's kind of like, all men are strong and all women are like childbearing, kind of like.
It's just weird because like the Violet girl is like very thin, and like
Yes.
that's what I imagine a character called Elastigirl being. Like her whole thing is like stretching out. Why she got that thick waist though?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
They definitely pay a weird amount of attention to it in this movie. There's like literally like a scene where she's like in bed after like a successful like mission or whatever, and she's in like a bathrobe with like just like bare legs, and I'm like, kids don't need this. Like, I'm not complaining, but kids don't need this.
Why am I hot and bothered about Elastigirl? And yeah, and Holly Hunter does an incredible job too of playing this character. I don't know, just yeah, it's weird that she's like a sexy character.
I feel like it's like a similar thing to like Lois from like Family Guy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's like same hairstyle. It's like kind of like that weird funky voice going on that shouldn't be hot, but for some reason there's a million porn images on the internet
most
of
definitely.
like Lois getting fucked by
yeah.
Brian or whatever.
Yeah, and just like I was talking about with the whole like strong biceps, children bearing hips, kind of yada yada yada. I feel like we overindulge in this kind of like retro future where it's kind of we eventually get into this plot of like, oh, how cheeky, like how role reversal of like, oh, like it felt like the 90s or something all of a sudden, where it's kind of like oh, dad has to stay home and take care of the kids. Like it wasn't very forward thinking. It felt like daddy daycare kind of, where it's kind of like, imagine if dads had to take care of the kids and moms had to be.
The part that I did appreciate about that was that I felt like it also handled the reverse side of that, where it would be bad if it was just, well, I should be the one out there like fighting crime, but he also did have this insecurity about like, well, what, you don't think I can take care of the kids by myself? And
He
like,
definitely has an ego. Yeah, right.
yeah. Well, just I feel like again, it's one thing if it's just him being like, well, I should be the one at the forefront,
Right.
but her having that doubt about him being able, like it's turning both
most definitely.
both stereotypes
Right, yeah.
on their head, not just one. It's not just, oh, what if a woman was a superhero? It's, what if there was a dad who was actually good at like raising his kids? And
Oh, right.
I feel like they handle that kind of decently. And
There's just a bunch of dated kind of jokes in here, and I think New Math is a very
it's a
dated,
weird thing. It's a weird
it's-
thing for a retro future thing, because New Math was not a thing in the 60s.
But also, it's not even a thing that's happening right now. I think it's a thing that was happening in the 90s. Like, it's almost like this entire script was written in the 90s.
I think it's a thing happening now in terms of like people who had kids are having kids now. Like their first kid, they wouldn't have had experienced New Math until their kid was learning New Math
Right.
now. Like if you're 40 years old, you don't know New Math until you're raising your 8-year-old and they're learning algebra that way.
Right, yeah.
But it doesn't make sense in this like retro future thing, because they wouldn't do that in the 60s. Like, it's just weird. It's like, it feels like a joke for another movie. I think it's an okay joke, but I think it's a joke for another movie.
Right, but I also think it's a joke that's reaching to an audience that existed more toward when the original kind of existed.
I think the audience is still there. I think people got it. I think they put
Oh,
it in the
no,
trailer
most-
for a
most
reason. I think
definitely.
it's
I
one of the
laugh-
funnier parts in what is not really a funny movie, in my opinion.
But
It's an entertaining movie, but I don't really laugh at this movie a lot.
I laughed at that kind of for my dad or my mom or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's like as much of like a clickbait article or something like now. Or
I think it's just a relatable thought. Like, my thought watching the trailer is like, I think he's kind of like speaking for a lot of people when he's like, math is math. Like, why would they change math?
Right,
like,
right.
And I think that's kind of a timeless thought, regardless of whether they changed math 4 years ago or however long ago, I'm just defending that point. I feel like I have more complaints about this movie than you probably do. But
Go for it. I mean,
I don't know how to voice them.
into
I don't
it.
know how to voice them though. It's a weird movie because
Okay, yeah.
like it feels similar to Ocean's 8,
Okay.
which we reviewed 2 weeks ago, or we released 2 weeks ago from here, where like I wasn't bored at all watching this. I do feel like it's a little long though. That's definitely a complaint I can put my finger on. It had no business really being that long. There
What
was
was the
definitely
length on this?
I don't know. It felt
Okay.
long though. There's definitely a point where I was just like, we're still going. Like wrap this the fuck up. I saw it at 5:30 and I didn't get home. Or I didn't leave the theater until like 8. So with the trailers, that's probably at least like over 2 hours.
Yeah.
Figure like 15 minutes of trailers. It's probably a 2 hour, 15-minute movie.
Honestly,
something like that.
I thought I was gonna miss the short film of this film because
Mm-hmm.
I got to the theater so late because I was honestly having problems with my Movie Pass. Sponsor us. I
I have to take pictures of my tickets now.
told you
I thought that was just going to be like a small market thing. I mean, I
told
guess
you.
they were testing it out and it worked.
they're trying to get us. Honestly,
Because what? Like, if we don't take a picture of our tickets, they're probably going to be like, "Oh,
Yep.
on your bill, here's the
Yep.
movie you didn't like confirm that you saw."
I didn't.
It's a small thing because you're always going to
Yeah.
get the movie stub, but
I
it's just something you have to remember.
I didn't
now.
update my phone like the day before. So I went to a different theater and he said, "Oh, like this is coming up as like I don't know, like an unidentified theater or something." I was swiping my card and I was like, "Never mind. It's like I'm just going to be late for this movie." So I went to the movie like by me and she was like, "It's doing the same thing." And I kind of thought I updated my phone because I parked at Chick-fil-A and I got a milkshake there and I was like, it should have time to update kind of. And it did update, but for some reason I still went to the next theater and
We did 3 theaters.
no, I went to 2.
Oh,
I went to the one in nearer to me, and she was like, "It's not working, but you know what? Just like go into the theater. I don't really care." And I said, "Thank you." I said, "This doesn't solve my fucking problem about the $10 a month service that I'm paying for, but thank you." So thank you, whoever is at the Regal Barn 14 or whatever. But yeah, no. And I went in there and I was like, oh, I'm going to miss the short film. I went in there and they were still fucking playing like 2 or 3 trailers about like
did
whatever.
you see the trailer for Axel?
No, I don't think I did.
It's like, it reminds me. Remember that one movie that was like the monster truck that was like alive? I think we watched like the first like 10
Oh
minutes.
yeah,
of it.
we watched a decent amount of
It's like similar setting. It's like a
monster
fucking like
trucks, yeah.
no name like hot guy with like long hair in like the desert,
I'm
like
into it.
on like a junkyard or
You're
whatever.
selling me, yeah.
And he finds like, I thought it was gonna be the Bumblebee trailer, and the Bumblebee trailer was after that, and it was like a like robotic dog called Axel that was like a military project, but it just acts like a real dog. And he's like, "Oh, your owners don't appreciate you
I've
enough."
seen that. Yeah.
I haven't seen it until now. I guess it's like a kids-oriented movie. Oh God, I can't wait to watch that on like Netflix one day.
No, guys, I made Mike while we were eating pizza the morning after we recorded. I was like, "Mike, Monster Trucks is on Amazon. Let's watch it." And Mike's like, "We're not gonna watch this whole thing, right?" And I was like, "I don't know. Let's see how it goes."
I think I had to leave. I didn't make it through it. Did you finish it?
No. I think we unanimously decided that like it was just not a good movie. And there
Did you see the Bumblebee trailer?
I haven't seen it yet.
It's more just it's actually a good trailer, I have to say.
Okay.
But you can tell it's going to be a shitty movie
Right.
because John Cena's in it, and
Oh no, really?
he's like one of like the military guys in it. And also, why do we need a Bumblebee movie? Like, I was fine with there being a bunch of Transformers movies. I don't need a Transformers spin-off movie. That's where I'm going to throw a fit.
But maybe that's how they get the money is I don't know.
They got plenty of money. They could have just done another Transformers movie. I'm fine with
Transformers
Transformers 10.
7?
I don't need Transformers -1. I don't need to know where Bumblebee came from.
Right, yeah.
Like, he was like one of my least favorite parts of any of the Transformers movies. I didn't give a fuck about Bumblebee ever.
Right.
Optimus Prime all fucking day. Anyway, we're digressing from Incredibles.
So
The point I was trying to make was that I had a similar reaction to Ocean's 8, where I came out of the theater being like, what do I really not like about this movie? It was good. Like, I was not bored at all. I was entertained while watching it,
Right.
but it just felt like something was like missing from this movie. And I'm still kind of having a hard time
Right.
putting my finger on it. Like, I feel like just in terms of like on the surface, it's too long, I think. I don't think it has
Okay.
any business being this long.
Right.
I don't think it's funny enough. So like, even if I'm like entertained, just like watching these cool visuals play out, like it's not really what I want from like a kids movie or a Pixar movie. Like,
Right.
I think I expect to laugh a little bit more. And then I didn't really feel like I got like a message. Like, I feel like with most Pixar movies, with like WALL-E, it's about like, consumerism and like, addiction to technology and like, not being able to like connect with other people, or like Toy Story, it's about like this like wonder and like, your toys coming to life or whatever. And I just didn't really know what I was supposed to glean from this movie as an adult viewer, or especially as a kid, because I view kids movies through a different lens, where I do think there needs to be a message for like a kids movie.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things happening in this movie. And it is a lot about, it's this kind of thing where it is this like role reversal of kind of like mom and dad. Like mom does dad's job and dad stays home and does the parenting or whatever. And then there's also this kind of like, kids, you're not important enough, you kind of look after the baby, yada yada yada. Then we have this kind of Bob Odenkirk character, who is kind of like the superhero fanboy, which I think we've seen in movies before. And then we have this Catherine Keener character. Is that who that is?
Yep.
Okay.
Very discernible voice.
Yeah.
I knew like right away.
Who is the sister of this Bob Odenkirk character, who, I don't know, it's harder to describe her. But definitely Mrs. Incredible, who, the Incredibles are this kind of like this outlier who are illegal, and they're not allowed to be a superhero or whatever. And we were talking about this before. What's his name? Is a character from Breaking Bad. Mike from Breaking Bad.
Jonathan Banks, Dickers.
Yeah, Jonathan Banks plays like a really, like, I would have loved to see more of him in this role.
I thought he was in the first one.
Oh no, he's not in the first one.
He's so like in it that
Yep.
you're just kind of like, oh, that must be a reprised role from the first one.
And he's so good, and he's kind of like this FBI kind of like private agent kind of character who erases somebody's mind, who saw the daughter character kind of like, like they were gonna go on a date, but then like he saw her without her mask on because she was kind of freaking out. I don't know. I love that kind of shit, and I wish he was in a little more of this, but he was not. Again, I kind of thought like the Mr. Incredible thing was a little. Again, I kind of thought that was a little like 90s role reversal, kind of like, God, he's like Mr. Mommy, like it's kind of, it was whatever. And again, the whole like new math kind of thing. It felt a little 90s for me, but I liked it. I liked it all the way through, and I really liked like the kind of like Elastigirl kind of like a revolution too. Especially because she's kind of been playing second fiddle to Mr. Incredible, and Mr. Incredible, who is kind of like, well, obviously they would pick me, and the guy again who has the broad shoulders and the strong kind of chest and throws things around and destroys like a lot of the cities, but still catches like the bad guy.
They had a lot of like non-starters in this movie that
Yeah.
kind of bugged me in terms of like I thought they were trying to establish something with I think we're probably safely in spoiler territory
Most
now
definitely.
for Incredibles 2.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert before I go for it. But like so they have the whole like screen slaver villain who I think is like a nice aesthetic choice. Like I'm kind of creeped out, but like only in like a kids movie way.
Yeah.
Like I can imagine kids are probably a little creeped out in a cool way.
Yeah.
But it's starting to like try to get across this message of like
He has one monologue.
like screen addiction and stuff like that. And it's just like a cool aesthetic to live in. Again, it was something that also reminded me of Arkham Asylum, you know, like going into his apartment and like looking around.
Yeah.
It reminded me of like the LA Noire video game a little bit, like just like detective work in like creepy situations like that. Just a lot of cool aesthetic things going around that. And I thought that they were building towards like a nice message that even if it doesn't make as much sense during the 60s, you know, maybe it'll stick with some kids today. Like it is kind of a cool message in terms of, you know.
I love that the like the minute that she arrests him and he's like, I'm a pizza boy. Like she's like, okay, I don't fall for this shit.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So like that was a nice message. And then they were also building towards this like thing where like the Catherine Keener character kept trying to like commiserate and relate to Elastigirl and kind of get her to like see the light, where she was like, you know, it must be nice that like, you know, now you're in the spotlight after like, you know, so long, like, you know, being in like Mr. Incredible's shadow. And I thought that we were building towards like two separate things. And then when we have like the reveal that like Catherine Keener's character is actually the screen slaver, we completely lose the whole message about like screens being the problem. Like it was almost just like a character and aesthetic that she picked just to be a villain for villain's sake.
Yes.
And she doesn't actually believe in any of that.
Right.
Like she's that has nothing to do with her motivation for anything. And her whole
like a red
motivation
herring,
is like a revenge for her parents dying and them trusting in superheroes too much, which like that's fine on its own, but that pisses me off when you have a good character in Screenslaver and then it's just kind of like a nothing thing.
Yeah.
And then they also end up killing the idea. Like I thought we were building towards her being like, you know, Elastigirl, like join me. Like, you know, I've been living in my brother's shadow for too long as well. And like, you know, we can, you know, it would be this kind of like, you know, like we've had this trend of like villains in superhero movies, like having this relatable message, but having awful methods.
Right.
And like, that's kind of a relatable message of like, you know, it's women's time now. Like, you know, we don't need to be subservient to men. We don't need to let men do all the important things. We can finally step out in the spotlight and out from the shadows.
Right.
But she's trying to do it in a fucked up way. And I thought that's what we were building towards as well. But then there's kind of like no, like, why was she saying those things to Elastigirl if her plan the entire time was to kill and outlaw all superheroes ever? Like, why would that commiseration happen?
Yeah.
Right?
No. I entirely agree with that. It's the... I don't know. The entire... the villain was just wasted. And I think there was something very important there. And it just ended up kind of being this red herring.
Like, it would have been almost cooler, like, if she was working with someone who was Screenslaver.
Exactly. Yes.
And this was her reason for helping Screenslaver, but he still had like his. It's just weird to like kind of like completely invalidate that like point that he was making that like has some validity. He's just doing it in a really fucked up way, kind of like Killmonger and Black Panther, or like you know, even Thanos in Avengers Infinity War. You know, we have had this trend of like relatable villains who are trying to express this kind of truth about society,
Right.
but they're doing it in really fucked up ways.
Yeah. No, agreed. I don't know. It's just a weird time for animated films, especially since we didn't really even review like something like Coco or something. And I'm trying to get like a general grasp of what's out there in animated movies, and it's like comparing this movie to like Despicable Me 3. Again, it's like a different breed.
Yeah.
It's weird, you know, because it's also kind of like a superhero movie. It's like kind of like a super villain movie.
I mean, it's great in a lot of ways. Like it's technically great, and I don't think I felt as much as I wanted to feel during it, but I was just definitely just entertained and like following these characters on the journey that they were going on. It's more of a physical journey. There's not really, in my opinion, a lot of like character development going on, because that was kind of the other half of my like non-starter point, is like they do have that whole plot arc of like, you know, oh well, like I got to stay home and like watch the kids, and like he's learning how hard her job is, and she's having a great time like doing his job, and like we don't kind of really have like a nice little bow that's put on that at the end. And like, I don't know, kids movies are where I look for those nice bows. Like that's kind of where like the pinnacle of like, you know, neat storytelling and writing should be. You know, that's where it is in movies like Iron Giant and Toy Story and stuff like that.
Definitely,
and I didn't really see that in this movie. It just kind of seemed like characters that we knew from the first one, just put in a different situation. And they weren't really thinking about like, you know, where should character A be at the beginning and where should he be at the end. Like Mr. Incredible, like what is his real transformation? You know, like I feel like he goes on a journey, but he doesn't actually end up at a destination.
Oh, right.
Like it feels like an unfinished plot arc for him, and kind of the same for like Elastigirl. Like she is on this journey, but like how does that change her?
Right.
It just kind of seems like we end up back where they are at the end of the first movie, I assume, in terms of being like a well-adjusted, nice family that's sorted out their problems. Dash also has no story in this movie.
Not at all.
Which I don't know if he's a bigger part in the first movie or if
he is. He is a larger part in the first movie, and I think that has to do with a lot of like the kind of end scenes where he struggles with hiding his powers, and that's not addressed at all in this movie, really. I mean, where Jack is kind of the punchline at the end.
He is only like the only funny part of this movie.
Yeah, no, he's the punchline at the end of the last movie. The standout scene of this movie is Jack
the raccoon
fighting the raccoon. It's such a
it's cute. It's very cute.
It's such a callback to older kind of films and everything, especially the one that he's, you know, watching on film or whatever. But yeah, it's a fantastic device of like all of his different superpowers, and it's such a tonal shift in this movie, especially because all of a sudden like a raccoon is like fucking like fearing for his life. He's kind of like kind of like Jack's like lighting everything else on fire, and it's fucking like horrifying for the raccoon. He's like like kind of like it's a very funny, and it definitely got the most reactions out of my movie theater. And like again, when it led into this at the end of it was kind of like a post-credit scene where it's kind of like, whoa, Jack's like the most powerful of them all, you know, in a post-credit scene in the last film. And then something like this is obvious, but it's still so funny, and it plays out so well, and it's one of the best scenes in this movie.
But there's also just like other Like
There's
I
so
wanted
many more
more of
important-
that. I
yeah.
wanted to laugh more like I did during that scene.
Yes, of course.
Where
yeah.
like even if it's not like like in kids movies, it's hard to do some of the more witty humor. Like there's parts that I did laugh at in this that I feel like just went over like a lot of other people's heads in this, or
Yeah.
just it wasn't up their alley. Like I think for me, still the funniest part of this movie is the one old man like superhero guy whose name is like was it Reflux or whatever, and he's like delivering his tagline, and he's like medical conditioner's superpower, you be the judge.
I actually did not.
I laughed really hard at that. No one else in my theater like even chuckled at that line.
No, I definitely laughed at that. I didn't like a whole lot of. I didn't like that part. I liked him, but I really liked the kind of the Portal superhero. Who was
Void.
that?
I was
Yeah.
I recognized the voice, but I couldn't place it. I'm trying to see if I can find it now. Sophia Bush.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't
is
crazy
it?
about her. I wasn't crazy about the way that the character was written when she like first was introduced or whatever. Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't crazy about that character.
That whole group of like secondary superheroes could have been a lot funnier.
Oh, most
and a lot
definitely.
more effective and a lot more.
So much humor could have come from that. Yeah.
It was just kind of like
they
they
didn't-
created a bunch of characters, but like they could have all been as funny as like Reflex or Reflex.
Oh, most definitely. And that was so funny and so like gross and kid humor, but also adult humor. Like it was just, yeah. And everybody else was just kind of like Portal and like,
Crusher
yeah,
or electricity or whatever. They were kind of boring superpowers.
It was even
Hers was useful and made for interesting visuals, but it was the rest of it, like the electricity guy, like okay,
Right,
like you might as
yeah.
well be like the water guy or the fire guy.
It's kind of like when they were having like cocktail hour with all of them. I was like bored. I was like, this is your time to make like the Minions characters who are just like, like it's just like funny in a short burst of time.
I think that's what they tried to do and did with the Jack character.
Most of them.
Where he does like the minions like nonsense talking, and that's what a majority of the laughs in my theater were from, was just him whenever he would talk, not even like his interactions with the raccoon. Like just him talking was hilarious for my theater, and it is funny, but
Like
was,
especially
like, the
when he
only thing they
points at
laughed
like
at.
the raccoon, he's like, "Azababa."
Joe finally gets minions humor. Yeah, I don't know. I wanted more for this movie.
Same.
I wanted it to be funnier. I wanted
Yeah.
to feel more. I didn't really feel a lot
Yeah.
in this movie.
Same.
Other than
it was
I was
really
entertained. I felt a lot of entertainment. I think it was an interesting story. I think I was captivated by everything that was happening. And apart from it like being too long, there wasn't really any point where I was like wanting it to be over in terms of boredom. Like I was entertained, but I was literally like, all right, like this climax has been going on for a long time. It's time to wrap it up. It's not that important.
Yeah, what parts did you feel emotional during this film?
Not many.
But like what? What parts?
I think Mr. Incredible trying
Sly Foxes would be everywhere.
that's right. I think Mr. Incredible trying to get back in the good graces of Violet by like taking them to the diner, I thought was kind of nice.
Yeah, that was good. It was really anything that had to do with Violet for me. Yeah, I don't want to hijack your...
I mean, that's really one of the only
Okay.
like emotional
Okay.
parts I really felt.
But I feel like it was really... Violet was kind of the emotional core of this film, and I kind of wish there was more. Because again, at the end where she was dating was kind of like an emotional part for me. Again, when she was at like the diner was kind of an emotional part for me. Yeah, I don't know. I really started to get emotional when she was kind of like, like I don't know, at the end.
I feel like they could have amped it up and like just
They could've.
focused on that storyline more, where it just kind of like it stood in this kind of like emotional widescreen view of like where we're seeing all the characters, and like I would have liked to hone in on some of their more like it was just kind of The Incredibles as a whole and the family as a whole, and I think it could have done more from like seeing what like Violet was going through more personally. Like we would see her in the context of what the whole family is dealing with, but then she would go into her room and be alone, and we wouldn't get to see Violet and her, you know, like her father's trying to get in, and we're, you know, still just being in like Mr. Incredible's shoes, but it's not really his story in this movie. And that I think was kind of hurting the movie too. Like the scene where he's like trying to get in the door and he's like, you know, Violet, like let me in. And she's like, if you want to help me, like just go away. If it should be Violet's story, which I think it wants to be because it ends on like the resolution of her sort of story arc in this movie, in terms of like the movie opens on this kid that saw her and the whole thing kind of gets ruined because of her being in the family. And then in the end, she is a little embarrassed, but she also, you know, she kind of like smirks a little bit. Like it's kind of like that, like, Dad, like you're embarrassing me kind of thing at the end. And that sort of feels like a resolution to that plot arc. So then if the story is Violet's, then why do we not go on the other side of that door and see what she's doing in that room? Like, why do we not see what Violet being upset looks like? And why do we not get a chance to relate more closely to that character? I think
My
I
only
wanted
complaint
more
is
stuff
that we
like
didn't
that.
get to see a lot of Dash. I don't know what Dash's struggle would have looked like.
There was a lot of like, there's just a lot happening in this movie that I'm like, what is this building towards? Like there was a whole bunch of weird stuff about like vegetables and eating healthy. And I couldn't tell if that was just them being like, we got to make sure kids know to eat healthy, or if it had to do with the actual story of this like movie.
Right.
Was that something
just-
in Incredibles or?
No, I don't think so. I think it's literally just like when some kid is that age, it's kind of like, what struggle is he going through? Kind of. I'd like literally, I don't think he has a struggle like in the original's Incredible. Like it's kind of like at that age, like everything's pretty chill. Like you
Well,
know,
like hiding your
besides
powers is
parents.
at least a you know, an on the surface struggle. That's what he
Like-
goes through in the first one, right?
What, like going too fast?
He's trying to.
Yes.
They want him to
Yeah,
hide
yeah,
his
yeah,
powers, and he
yeah.
doesn't want to hide his powers.
Yes,
He wants to
correct.
run around
Yeah.
fast all over. Yeah, he doesn't even have that
Yeah,
in this.
right.
He just has this weird like curiosity with things, and like even like the car, like that was, I don't know, I was waiting for some kind of like father son moment in
Metaphor
the
with
car,
that, yeah.
and like you know, teaching your kid to drive or something like that, and him wanting to be an adult, and maybe the car is like a symbol of like, oh, you can drive the car now, you're the kid. And we didn't even like get that. There's a lot of,
Right.
it seemed like, it doesn't seem like a movie that they spent 14 years writing, I guess is maybe my
most
complaint. Is that
definitely.
like,
yeah.
like they say that in like the intro thing, and that's like another reason not to show that thing, because they're like, oh, you know, it took 14 years to do this because we were taking our time, but we think you'll feel that it's worth it. And I kind of feel like this seems like a movie that would have been slapped together in like 2006, like 2 years
Yes.
after The Incredibles came out. Not like if you've had 14 years to think about it. I know Brad Bird's been doing other things, but like,
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. If he cared that much about The Incredibles, you would think he would have made like an immaculate sequel
Oh, most
to it
definitely.
14 years
yeah,
later.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I did still like this movie, and
No, I did too. It's enjoyable. It's just there is something missing. That's
Oh no, most definitely, because I think I don't know. Yeah, exactly. what
it's
you
not
said.
like completely vapid and problematic, you know.
It's not Despicable Me 3.
Yeah, like I mean, like it makes sense. It doesn't have ADD, even if there is a lot going on. Like it seems like they were trying to work towards some things, and they maybe just didn't complete those arcs. But it's definitely not like as perfect as like I sort of expect some Pixar movies to be. Like I think it's among probably some of the worst Pixar movies I've seen. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen Cars. I haven't watched a lot of Pixar movies that I know
Jesus
are
Christ,
not
yeah,
good.
I haven't seen Cars either.
Like most Pixar movies are pretty good, so it's not
I
a
mean-
huge detriment to say it's one of the worst Pixar movies I've seen.
Pixar sequels wise.
Toy Story 2. What else is there? Finding Dory.
I guess that yeah. There's Finding Dory. There's Toy Story 2 and 3. There's the Monsters
University. That was
Monsters
actually a really
University.
great sequel.
Yeah, there's Cars 2 and 3. Yeah, I think that's all. So, yeah. It's a weird kind of category for this movie to be in.
It did also just very much feel like a sequel in a lot of ways.
Almost
in like
definitely.
a negative way.
And also,
Like it felt like it was just struggling to capture the magic of the first one, and it was just kind of like, let's put these characters from the first one in a different situation.
it was
But we don't have to make them grow at all.
I mean, it also came out at a weird time where superhero movies are kind of a dime a dozen. I mean, they come out literally every month.
Yeah, it's not really satiring it at
yeah,
all.
There was like really nothing new that they could present, aside from the kind of original era that they were in. Besides that, I mean, you could kind of count on multiple hands on, this, like the twist or whatever. Like, this has happened in several action movies. Like, this is same exact twist, kind of.
And they do kind of give it away just in terms of how detailed Catherine Keener's character is animated. Like the moment she steps on screen and the moment you hear that voice, you're like, she's something important. Something is going to happen because of this character. I didn't know that she was necessarily going to be a bad character. I was kind of predicting Bob Odenkirk's character to be a bad one just because he was too happy and nice. So I guess that's a successful twist that they pulled off in terms of misleading us in that way.
Yeah. And again, he's more so.
The moment he was like pitching to them, I was like, all right, what's the catch? Like,
Yep.
At some point, he's going to be the greedy guy who's like, all right, you're not making me enough money. So
Right, yeah. He's the fanboy who gets out of control.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But yeah, let's get into the ratings of this movie.
Let me get some Rotten Tomatoes up. And I feel like we did have something about Incredibles on the Facebook group. You pull that up while I get this Rotten Tomatoes out of the way. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 93% based on 153 reviews, with an average rating of 7.9 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, Incredibles 2 reunites Pixar's family crime-fighting team for a long-awaited follow-up, that may not quite live up to the original, but comes close enough to earn its name. Oh, yes, I have the comment. Former guest Nick Ocello says, there was 5 of them, not 2.
That's to read it. Nick was probably responding to our Ocean's 8, to which Rowan commented, not enough ocean, and I said, I was promised 8 oceans. Nick said there was 5 Incredibles, not 2. So that's the only comment we really have. Join, how many fingers am I holding up? The Facebook group.
There's engaging discussions all the time.
Yes.
Or there could be if you joined. I can go first. I don't have... I feel like I've kind of laid it all out so far in terms of... Didn't have high hopes because I didn't see the first Incredibles. Enjoyed this, but was also disappointed just based on, the reviews that were out for it, 93%. And
you haven't looked at the Rotten Tomatoes.
They're overall positive. And I can't disagree. It's an overall positive movie, but it's not incredible in the way that I glean from like other Pixar movies, you know, like Wall-E, you know, it's got like this incredible message and it does stuff without
yeah.
words in a way that's beautiful, you know, or like Toy Story is it's just hilarious and funny and like relatable to kids. And, you know, just all these other Pixar movies that can, you know, do things that other movies can't. And this just kind of seems like what does this really excel at?
Right.
You know, like the one thing I could say maybe is just animation, but I feel like that, you know, that's also a little bit unfair because animation gets better every year. And, you know, Pixar's always going to be doing another better animated movie in terms of technology and whatnot. You know, not to really take that away from any of the Pixar movies, but this is a technically well-made movie. I think that there's something missing. You know, that's how I felt when I got out of it, was like, I feel like I should like this movie, but I don't. And I've been trying to kind of figure out what I don't like about this movie. And I think it's just that these arcs feel unfulfilled for all these characters. It feels like there's no message and thus no like real point besides just like the, you know, purely physical storyline that happens in terms of just, you know, the superficial, what's in front of us. And I feel like the unfulfillment of like the Screenslaver villain is also like a big negative for me because I was so into Screenslaver when it first like showed up.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Like it felt so in line with like the, you know, like Underminer villain, where I was just so into this aesthetic of like that was so cool to me. Like like just the goofy like villains that like need to like, they didn't even like need to make jokes about it. It was just like a satire without a punchline in terms of like.
Agreed. Yeah.
Like Underminer just being like this gopher looking villain. Like it was just like, it was fine. That's all it needed to be. Right. And then it just got a little messy by like introducing the Catherine Keener character into that. Like, what's her real shtick? She's just kind of a person. She's got no like aesthetic or vibe going on. And that kind of like killed a little bit of it for me. And then they didn't tie up any of these storylines. Like, I don't know why there wasn't like a pivotal scene of like Mr. Incredible, like, you know, being like, no, Elastigirl, you do this. I'll stay here, you know? Like if that was going to be his storyline of like struggling with the fact that she was better suited at some things than he was, like why wasn't there a payoff for that besides just like the family getting together at the end? So all that is to say, I'm going to give this 3.5 fingers. I think 3 feels too low. It is a good movie. It's technically made very well. And I enjoyed it very much while watching it. But there is just something that's kind of missing from this. It's not perfect by a long shot at all.
Right. Yeah. I think this is the. I mean, honestly, if you've listened to this and you've listened through the spoiler or whatever, and you like Incredibles, I would say go see this. This is like a really. This is a good fucking sequel. I don't think I could say this. I maybe I could kind of say the same about the Finding Nemo.
Finding Dory.
Yeah, the Finding Nemo sequel. I don't know. I really enjoyed this. I really didn't expect it to kind of have a narrative or something to say about modern superhero movies just because it's on a completely different narrative and everything and so forth. I really enjoyed this. I went to go see this in a theater, and honestly, I watched the trailer and I was kind of like, I don't know about this, honestly. Like, this doesn't look great. I kind of didn't like the role reversal of Mr. Incredible. I was kind of like, I don't know about this. You know, like the kind of spotlight on, Mrs. Incredible. But then all of a sudden, I was kind of thrown into this movie and I was like, oh no, she's like Elastigirl. And she kind of has this own plot line. And it really, I don't know, I really fucking like was into that shit. And again, as much as I thought like the kind of Mr. Incredible at Home was like super 90s and shit, where it's kind of like I gotta be a dad and I gotta be at home and taking care of my children. Again, ladies
I think
and
they were trying to put the spin on it of like, you know, Mr. Mom with superhero kids.
Right,
Like,
yes.
It's not just a baby pooping in a diaper. It's a baby like lighting on fire and going to a fourth dimension. And
Right, yeah, and their costume designer. I'm so glad that she was such a minimal, like, cameo kind of. I was really worried. Like, I saw her in the trailer and I was like, "Ooh, man."
is she a big part of the first movie,
Yeah.
or is she like a small part that everyone cared too much about?
Ladder.
Right, like
And
in the reception of the movie, she
Yes.
became a big part. Yeah,
ladder. And then they use her a perfect amount in this movie. Where it's kind of like she's not like, hey, I'm just your housemate living in this like mansion, and like they kind of use her the perfect amount, kind of. She doesn't interact with like a lot of different people. We can still get that kind of yada 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 with the new baby, and I loved.
She's played by Brad Bird, supposedly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we get like the kind of the Jack kind of like where he like is that was another big laugh by me and by my audience, is where Jack is I guess doing an impression of her again with the hair kind of, but then later when they're like walking in the hallway, like after they've only spent a night with each other, and he's kind of like sucking on his lollipop the way that she would hold her like long kind of whatever she holds kind of yeah, and that was really fantastic. Yeah,
Incredible, one might even say.
it was an incredible movie. Yeah, no, honestly, if you saw the first movie and you liked it, I think you're gonna enjoy this. If you did not see the first movie, and I don't know, I think you're gonna have a better time than maybe if you saw Coco. You know, like I haven't seen Coco. but I can tell you this much: I'm not super interested in seeing Coco. I'm super interested in like Dias das Muertes, and like just still Coco. Zero real interest from me. You know what? Honestly, I might come back and say like, "Hey, man, this is you know." But I mean, even Finding Dory, I didn't think was that great of a movie. Sometimes Sabriel will be like, "Hey, let's fall asleep to Finding Dory," and I'm like, honestly, that's a movie that I just wanted to watch once. If it was Incredibles 2, I'd be like, let's put that shit on. Let's fucking put that shit on. And I think that's why I'm gonna give it a 3.5 fingers. That's how it goes.
It's two very different ways of arriving at the same number. Yeah, so obviously that is gonna come out to 3.5 even. Don't even have to do any math on that one. Yeah, don't really have much else. If you agree or disagree, leave a comment below on SoundCloud, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're finding out about this episode or watching or listening to it. We'd love to hear from you and continue the conversation. You can obviously join our Facebook group. How many fingers am I holding up? The Facebook group. Just search that on Facebook, and you can converse with us there. We've usually got posts going for any of the movies we reviewed or will review, so you can have your opinion heard on future episodes. Anything else you can find at howmanyfingerspodcast.com, or Joe will cover in the intro.
I will.
And I think this will probably come out after our live episode, but maybe check out our recording of our live episode.
Let us know how it goes.
Let us know how we did.
Could be a nightmare.
We'll see you guys next week for probably Jurassic World, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't know because we're not recording for 3 weeks. We'll see you then, though.
Later.
Signing out for How Many Fingers the Podcast. I'm Mike.
I'm Joe.
Goodbye.